What if the systems designed to protect you are the ones keeping you trapped? 1 in 3 women, 168 million, will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. That's in the US alone. But here's the part nobody talks about. When you finally leave, when you show up in court displaying the natural symptoms of trauma, fragmented memory, anxiety, hypervigilance, you don't get help. You get relabeled as unstable or dramatic or not credible. Meanwhile, your abuser shows up calm and composed, and the system rewards that performance. This is institutional betrayal, and it's why survivors go back an average of 7 times before they leave. So today, we're exposing how family courts, law enforcement, and even therapists can re-traumatize victims. Join me as I talk to Anne Wintemute, the co-founder and CEO of AimeeSays, the trauma-informed AI assistant for victims and survivors of relationship abuse. I'm so excited for you to hear this incredible conversation. Let's dive into this episode of Restoring Resilience. Welcome, Anne, to the show. I'm very excited to have you here today.
Chelsey, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, just to tell people a little bit about who you are, you're the co-founder and CEO of AimeeSays, a powerful trauma-informed AI. You are a fierce champion and advocate for the rights of survivors, children, systems that hold predators accountable. And you have a wealth of knowledge and wisdom. And I'm so happy you're here on the Restoring Resilience podcast, because when you first showed me AimeeSays, when we met probably months ago now, I said, people have to see this. Like, people have to understand that there's AI out there like this, because I think at this point, I mean, it's only become more important. We are all using AI, but I think that it can also be really dangerous if you're using something that doesn't understand things like gaslighting, coercive control, trauma bonds. AI could actually keep you more stuck. So at the end of this episode, you're going to give us an inside look at exactly what AimeeSays can do and how it can really help survivors. But before we get there, I want to talk about something that so many survivors experience but rarely name, or I don't even know if most people know about this term, institutional betrayal. And this is what happens when the systems that should protect us, think family courts, law enforcement, honestly, even therapists, unfortunately, end up re-traumatizing victims and survivors. And so a lot of times what I see with survivors, with my clients, is that you show up in court displaying those natural symptoms of trauma. Like, you're upset, your memory is fragmented, you feel anxious, you might feel angry. And instead of being viewed as somebody who's been harmed, like, of course you would look like that and feel like that, you get relabeled in the court system as just unstable or dramatic, or worse, not credible. And then the abuser shows up as this calm, composed person. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about, why AimeeSays can be so helpful in situations like that.
I mean, you said it perfectly. Institutional betrayal is that switch from being able to believe that the systems are there when you need them, that you're a law-abiding citizen, you pay your taxes. And so if ever comes a time where you need the system to help you, that it will be there. And I would say most people find out that that's not true. Fortunately, most people don't have a whole lot of systems engagement throughout their life with the justice or legal system. So it may be the very first time they realize it in a family court context. It is devastating in so much as it recreates the abusive environment. And in recreating it, it reinforces, right? It reinforces that power control dynamic and the perpetual victim blaming. So some of the things that victim survivors are being blamed for are their responses to long periods of victimization. So they show up emotional, they show up desperate. The system has reinforced the same power dynamics within the relationship, so they are triggered. Right? It isn't any different than their abuser telling them that they're a liar when they try to stand up for themselves, if a courtroom is doing it, or a judge, or a therapist, or a custody evaluator, et cetera. So that same trigger is going to happen. It would be inhumane to expect survivors to not experience that.
Yeah.
I find, it's always so concerning how victim blaming it is to be like, okay, well, you have to be emotionless, you have to deliver this information dispassionately. We're trying to do a little bit better than that by allowing people to show up as they are and using AI, which is highly scalable. It's instant, it's available to everyone. Using AI to allow that person to continue to show up as they are, to process that in a healthy way, and to arrive at something that is more likely to be accessible or heard in the environment that they're in. So rather than saying to a survivor, well, you just got to shut it off. This is how you got to act. You can't do X, Y, Z. Actually
Yeah.
guiding that person through that process. The opportunities for AI in that are, you come with your messy, chaotic lived experience where you don't know which direction is up, but you are deeply animated by fear and a desire to protect yourself, to protect your children. And through that conversation, data accumulation with your AI partner, if you will, you can arrive authentically at a
Hmm.
place that is grounded, at a place that is authentic, that understands your story, that understands and is able to retell that narrative and experience in a way that other folks will be able to hear, people who you need to be able to act on your behalf, right? If that's an evaluator, a fact finder, et cetera. That is one of the really wonderful opportunities of AI. Like you were
Hmm.
saying earlier, what AI you use matters
So
because
much.
every AI is trained, fine-tuned to a certain extent. Like we know that ChatGPT can be kind of sycophantic. Yes, that's a good idea, just about whatever your idea is. And so it could reinforce decisions or steps that might actually lead you toward a worser outcome. So definitely utilizing an AI that is trauma informed, that has an understanding of power control dynamics, the family court system, et cetera, to make sure that the guidance that you are getting is pointing you in the right direction, and not further away from your goals.
Yeah. And takes that into consideration. Like, it's kind of like thinking about talking to somebody who doesn't know anything about coercive control and then expecting to get good results back.
Mm-hmm.
Like expecting to get good advice. You ask somebody about how to navigate narcissism or narcissistic abuse or gaslighting, or like you're talking about power imbalances, and then going to them and expecting to get results and steps like, how do I navigate this? How do I deal with this anxiety? Why am I ruminating? Why do I feel like this? If you're talking to the wrong person, you are going to stay stuck there. And I think a lot of times that's exactly what people are doing. If let's say they go to AI and they put in a story, they put in a snippet, as we often do, of like, this is happening. What does this mean? Well, AI that's not trained to be trauma informed might say, well, it sounds like it's a communication issue. Sounds like couples
Mm-hmm.
therapy might be helpful.
Oof,
And before you
yes.
know it, you're doing all the work as we typically do as survivors. And we're setting up the couples therapy and we're talking through it. And we know that going to couples therapy with a narcissist or a toxic person or abuser is the worst thing that you can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it just absolutely opens up new doors, new avenues for abuse. You gave two great examples. So you're right that a model that isn't trained to detect and respond to power and control dynamics is more likely to do the kind of unintentional
Hmm.
damage that a therapist or marriage counselor might do, which is where there's a presumption of kind of equal worthiness, equal entitlement to boundary, and equal ethic, equal character, right?
Hmm.
There's a presumption perhaps that both people are showing up and trying to be their best but flawed selves. For the same reason, that's not, you shouldn't go to a therapist an abusive, narcissistic or otherwise relationship, is because that's kind of the presumption, the ground from which they're working. And then if you go to a friend, they're more likely to do the whole like, well, you fight power with power. Well, if he says this, then you need to say that. If they're going to smear you, then you need to smear them. And it's in a lot of dynamics, like interpersonal dynamics, there is some truth to when both people are charactered, ethical people. Like, no, you've crossed a boundary, and I'm going to push that back with you. That is not necessarily an abnormal way to engage with people who step out too far, right? Like puppies playing with mom, bites too hard, mom bites back. Power to power. There's a place for that in our kind of human existence. There is not a place for that in an abusive or controlling relationship, because one person is far more attached to that power, is far more willing to cause potentially grievous, even lethal harm to reinforce that power dynamic. So it's another way that going to the wrong person with the wrong background, with the wrong intentions, with the wrong framework, whether person or AI, could exacerbate a situation. And then, unfortunately, it also it dampens, puts a cloud over help-seeking behaviors. Right? If you go out, you need some help, and you go out and you try, and it ends badly. There are reasons that the statistic of a woman going back 7 times before she leaves exists, and one of those reasons is those help-seeking behaviors can go awry.
Exactly. And I think that brings me to the next question that I was going to ask you, which is I want to talk about some of those dangerous myths that I think keep survivors trapped. So let's dig into some of those. And I'm open to hearing the ones that you hear most of the time. I know that the one that I hear a lot with clients, the frustrations that they have heard from other people and that I've heard myself being a survivor, is we'll just leave. Like
Yeah.
just walk away, just go. Or if it was that bad, then why did you go back, or why didn't you leave sooner? So it's
Hmm.
kind of this catch 22 where you're either staying too long, you're not leaving soon enough, you left too, like it feels
Hmm.
like you can't win, and then that just adds to another wave of isolation for survivors. And then like to your point, why do people stay? Because even when they've tried to get advice or suggestions or feedback or help, people are kind of still pushing it on you or pushing it as a relationship issue or something that you need to figure out. You need to work out your marriage, or all
Hmm.
relationships are difficult, all relationships are challenging. What's that going to do to your kids? Like so many things. So I wonder how you
Yeah.
come across that in your work.
I mean, we talked about the institutional betrayal. So first of all, like, why didn't you just leave? Those are things said by people who have not experienced that institutional betrayal. Someone who has is not going to tell you that,
Yeah.
because there's kind of the that comes from a place of, if you fall down, they will catch you. Right? There are systems for that. If he's doing a bad thing, they'll make it stop. And then the system doesn't do that. And those outsiders go, well, I guess it wasn't abuse then, was it? Right? Because the system would do it. They get to
Yeah.
avoid the experience or the recognition that the systems don't actually do what they say they will. They don't actually do a particularly good job at protecting women and children. Another example. So we know that, like, the CDC just revised the numbers or the incident rate of victimization of women, domestic violence, up 33% to 1 in 3. Okay, 1 in 3. That's a lot of women. It's 168 million women.
Yeah.
When we think about abuse, we still think like, what? Like, someone who's not on the inside be like, I don't actually know anyone who's been in an abusive relationship. And so those who have not, or who do not know that they were, because that's also fairly prevalent, say things when someone is making a micro disclosure to them that tell that victim making that micro disclosure that they will not be understood. Their situation won't be understood. They won't get the help that they need. And those things can be really subtle. It can be like, yeah, I was kind of uncomfortable last night. Like, he said this thing, and I need to talk about it. And the person who is not tuned in to what might be present here says things like, "Oh gosh, couples fight. I had a fight with my husband the other day too." Or, "I'm sure he didn't mean it like that. Like, those are pretty rough words, but I bet if you went and talked to him." So inadvertently, just through trying to be a supportive friend, they have sent a very clear and strong signal
Yeah.
that they're not ready to receive that information, that they're not going to be able to help. They're coming to it, to that conversation with a myth about domestic violence isn't common. It's not common. So the thing that this person is saying to me right now probably is not abuse.
Right.
And then we reinforce the silencing of survivors, and they stay entrapped in these relationships because we've sent them a million signals that they won't be believed, in fact, won't help them. And then when they go and they do take that leap of faith and say, okay, I'm out, there's all sorts of institutional betrayal on the other side of that.
Yeah, and to your point, and I want to highlight that number so people really hear that 1 in 3, which you said translates to how many million?
Well, with the number of women in the United States, 168 million women
Wow. 168 million women that are experiencing some form of domestic abuse.
that have, yes. So
That
the
have.
1 in 3 is considered a lifetime risk.
Yeah.
But yes.
That's interesting. A statistic that I often talk about that was released by the NHI a while ago is that NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, has a lifetime
Mhm.
prevalence rate of about 6%. And if you consider that those 20 million narcissists, which is what that translates to, impact just negatively impact five other people, that's 99 million narcissistic abuse survivors in the US
Mhm.
alone.
Mhm.
But I mean, really, that number, as you're sharing here, is way too low.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we used to joke, how do we describe Amy to people? Amy is for the 90% of people who are trying to make sense of the 10% who never will,
That's a
right?
great slogan. Yeah.
The 10% of people who will never make sense because, their way of engaging in interpersonal relationships is just
Yeah.
fundamentally different. Yes, I would, when we take all of, let me say it registers, like the person is really impacted by that. It's the narcissist's coworkers, right? It's all of the people that the narcissist has ever dated. It's the black sheep in the family, if there's a golden child. It is their colleagues, their schoolmates. Yeah, I would imagine that number could be figured up much higher.
Much higher. Yes. And just to highlight how there are millions of survivors going through this. I mean, there are millions of narcissists in even just the US alone. We know they're all around the world, but that statistic is just in the US. And so, of course, there are millions and millions more survivors and people dealing with this. But something else that you said I wanted to come back and highlight is that micro disclosure, because I don't think we
Mhm.
highlight that enough or talk about that enough. And I want survivors and people to hear that because what that means is that you have been subtly, probably even subconsciously, searching for help
Mhm.
and searching for people to get it. You've been, use like a fishing example, like casting your hook out there, like trying to get somebody to like take this, see what I'm saying, like
Mhm.
hear me. Something isn't right here. And I think that relates to a struggle that we have with as survivors of putting what we're experiencing into words. And the chaos of the confusion is one of the ways that narcissists and abusers keep so much power in the relationship is they make
Mhm.
it so confusing you
Yeah.
don't even know how to explain it to others.
Yeah, and I call that disequilibrium. Like power only exists in the presence of disequilibrium, and that confusion, right, is maybe
Yes.
it's not benign, it's very harmful, but confusion doesn't require a forceful act, right? Confusion can be a lazy abuser's tactic. That's probably not the quote that I want out there, but I hope that makes sense. It is possible to create a nearly perpetual power imbalance by confusion alone. And what you were just saying, micro
Hmm.
disclosures, uh, it's like testing to see if the pan is hot, except most
Yeah.
of the times it will be really hot, right? It's a little test, a little test. These relationships are pervaded by uh, the survivor's deep, deep fear that it's her fault,
Yeah.
right? It is terrifying. Is that you're constantly animated by a sense of fear that you are fundamentally flawed, unlovable, deserving of the treatment that you experience. And so when you think about like reaching out to touch that pan and that pan being warm, you're going to recoil right back. And it just kind of incidentally, so the way that our system works, we can't see what people say to Amy. There's no third party disclosure. You're not waiving confidentiality by talking with our AI because it's a closed AI, which is a technical term. But there are certain areas where we're able to get an idea of incident rates of particular things. And Amy automates tagging the types and tactics of abuse for you to see on your dashboard. So you don't have to do all that heavy lifting. You just come with that lived experience. So we can tally the frequency of the different types and tactics that are tagged and applied to these events. The number one tactic is victim blaming or blame shifting, excuse me,
Wow.
onto the victim. And it's fascinating because that's not something that we've researched before collectively. It's not the kind of data the CDC or NIH or, the federal or state governments or coalitions interested in. But it's demonstrative of the atmosphere and the fear that is created for survivors that they're the problem. And I just bring that back to why they make these micro disclosures is because if you say, well, you're being sensitive, or if I make a micro disclosure and that person says, I'm sure he didn't mean it that way, it is an affirmation that the abuser is right. And this is somehow your fault, right? That you have actually caused this. The second most pervasive tag is falls into the coercive control category. It's restricting that person's autonomy, specifically in their daily living and activities. So people, really getting micromanaged down and, made to believe that things are their fault, creates an atmosphere where disclosure is very unsafe, feels very unsafe.
Wow. I am just taking notes as you are explaining this because I want to get that. I know it's not like a quote unquote official statistic, but I don't know anybody, any survivor that wouldn't resonate with. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think that speaks exactly to why one of the most Googled and researched topics is, am I the problem? Am I the narcissist? Is
Yeah.
this my fault? Like, am I causing this? Because that, as you're describing, these micro disclosures, that's really what we're asking without asking. Is this
Mm-hmm.
me? Is
Yeah.
is this normal? Is this am I being too sensitive? Am I overthinking this? Am I
Mhm.
being realistic? Am I asking for too much? Like that is really the underlying question. If we could, you know, say it more directly, even I think
Yeah.
it's existing subconsciously. So I'm so glad that you're bringing that to our awareness. So again, language is such an important, way that we heal and way that survivors become empowered
Mm-hmm.
is to be able to have
Yeah.
that language to describe it. So that, I mean, I'm taking away that blame shifting and the restricting autonomy, which also is huge. Why you feel like these
Mm-hmm.
relationships are putting you in a psychological prison.
Mm-hmm.
You may not literally, you may literally be able to go out your house and have a
Yes.
job and have kids and like live a normal life, which of course is what other people are seeing. They're seeing you live a normal life, maybe even live, quote, the good life. Like you've got a house, you're married, you've
Mm-hmm.
got kids, maybe you live in a nice neighborhood. And they're not seeing the fact that you are in a psychological prison being emotionally, mentally put down and destroyed every day.
Yeah, they can't see it and you can't because you live in a condition of perceived choice, right? Well, you can leave the
Mm,
house. You have choice. When you perceive that there is choice, it's very difficult for you or somebody else to recognize that your choices, even the most minute of them, are calculated decisions based on the dynamics that are unique to that relationship. When we were training our AI to properly detect the kinds of kind of micro control, if you will, that make up restricting people's autonomy in those daily decisions, we had what we called the strawberry test. The idea being that the survivor was only allowed to cut the strawberries a certain way, right? In order to prevent the upset and clearly totally justified anger of a controlling partner. And if we said to the model, well, I had to cut the strawberries in a certain way, or I didn't cut the strawberries right, that it would have to pick that up because
wow.
that is the kind of slight, like, well, I'm able to cut the strawberries. I was able to get the strawberries at the store. I have agency. I have control. Like, no, you really don't. There's a very specific display of the strawberries that's required in the context of that relationship. And if you don't capture that, if you can't see it, you fail to really see and understand the totality of the dynamic. It means that you then kind of underestimate the harm or the impact to the survivor because you're not seeing all of those things. That's a really important aspect to us in training our model to see it all.
So true. And that, I mean, I can literally think of experiences that I've had where I couldn't put the spoons up right. Like I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't, it's that, like you said, those perceived choices you think you have. I know for so many clients and survivors out there, I can imagine so many can pull, their own strawberry story. Like, what are the
Yeah.
things that quote unquote, can't do right or have to do a certain way. And again, this just gets baked into the relationship and a culture. And I think especially we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about female survivors. there is an inequitable burden that gets placed on females in particular. So, before we get into Aimee, which I want to give you time to show us inside of that, I wanted to briefly talk about the invisible burden of survivorship, which is that exhausting mental and emotional load that survivors keep having to carry every single day. So, even if they're out of the relationship, perhaps for years or decades, or maybe their whole life after this kind of relationship. And thinking that in the relationship, you're likely responsible for so much. You're responsible for trying to keep the peace, manage their emotions, manage their
Mhm.
moods, perhaps, be responsible for the kids, the household, all the things working too. And then when you're out of the relationship, you still have to think about documenting everything for legal custody situations. You've got to learn to manage your nervous system, navigate systems that, as we're talking about, are really not designed to be trauma informed. You're trying to
Mhm.
protect your kids, you're trying to rebuild your self worth. I mean, there is so much that survivors are doing. And again, it goes back to why it's not just, why didn't you leave? Like everything would be fine if you leave. And then a lot of times when you do leave, people are still saying, aren't you happy that you don't have to deal with that anymore? That's not in your life anymore. Like you should feel happy. You should feel, better. So I guess my question is how can AI help, and particularly AimeeSays, like help lighten this load this invisible load that survivors are
Mhm.
carrying around that nobody's seeing?
Yeah, and first to the load, like at least conceptually, people, although they kind of under apply it, they can conceptually understand what it might have been like in the relationship to be the one who did all the cooking and cleaning perhaps and childcare and maintenance of the home life, etc. Often in addition to working, like, oh yeah, that's a lot of load. That would be really hard, and especially in the context of feeling underappreciated or scared.
Mhm.
We came up with the word survivorship. That there was no name for the burden that continues. And if we don't have a word for it, it's invisible. We can't acknowledge it. We can't create tools or resources to help with it. But congratulations, you've ended the relationship. You get to move out of, hopefully, this kind of phase of victimization, if you will, into survivorship, which, guess what? There are no resources. You listen to folks like Chelsey, you're going to feel so much better. There are very limited resources for the ongoing emotional and cognitive loads of survivorship. So you've ended this relationship, you're traumatized. You now, if you have children and a court case or custody or you're employed, you have all these systems that you're bumping up against in terms of how your needs and what they're able to offer you are not in alignment. And it is your job and your job entirely to recreate your world, to convince people who need to be convinced that the relationship was abusive, to convince the people who need to be convinced that your children need to be safe, to try to keep your job while you're doing that. And let alone the fact that for the next 10, maybe plus years, every interaction you have, every relationship you build will be augmented and changed by your experience as a survivor. And you alone will navigate that. So we'll move forward from there into how Aimee does that. A lot of it is really task based. It is nearly administrative or secretarial, right? For example, documenting. Everyone is told, oh, you should document that. You need to
Mhm.
document everything that's happening, do it in writing. And yet, no one tells you how to document it. Everyone has different ways of documenting it. And there's the emotional and mental load of the documentation that survivors resent. Of course they do, right? It's like still washing your ex's underwear. Please, when does it stop? That it is my job to make this situation better, that it's my job to do
Yeah.
this. Again, systems betrayal or institutional betrayal because no one else is intervening on your behalf. So Aimee and documentation. With Aimee, we have automated it such that as you're having those conversations with her that you are leading, that are based on the conversation that you want to have, she's actually extracting the data points. She's doing that documentation. We're going to take a look at what that looks like. Other daily tasks. He just sent me this message. My I don't even want to read it or my brain's going to blow off. How do I respond? My attorney said I need to collect all the information about XYZ. What do I do? My employer canned me after being a victim of a crime. And I think that that was a wrongful termination. What do I do? What information do I need to get together? My doctor doesn't believe me. I think that the stress has actually spiked my cortisol. I think I'm in, adrenal fatigue. How do I provide the information that my doctor needs, for me to get the information that I need? How do I prepare for this IEP? My son needs this. We're going to the doctors. It's constant, and everything is augmented and burdened by this history of victimization. Aimee is the companion that makes you not alone while you're doing that, that's doing the documentation and that aids the decision making, the drafting, the bringing together of the information you need so that that emotional and cognitive burden is no longer solely the survivors.
Wow,
And
amazing.
she does it for $20 a month, which you didn't ask me the cost of the program, but when we think about like, oh my gosh, what does it cost survivors to be
Yeah,
buried in that sludge and quicksand every day? A lot more than that.
right. Price versus cost. It's,
Hmm.
it's price $20, but the cost is, I mean, all the things that you named are so relatable. So what if you had somebody who knew exactly how to help you with all of those things? That thing is priceless. I mean, how much will we pay for that? A lot. And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there's a free version too. So even if you don't
Hmm.
do that, you can still access it.
Yes, there's a free version. You can talk as long, whenever, over as many months or years as you need for free with Aimee. Once we're storing your data and keeping that for you, there's a paywall.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
Okay, well, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and let you share your screen. Give us a sneak
All right.
peek inside Aimee and what she can do for us.
Oh, perfect. And we'll talk a little bit about the things that we just talked about.
Yeah.
So, one of the burdens of survivorship, I've got to go to this doctor's appointment with my ex, which is going to be triggering and re-traumatizing. Now, most doctor's appointments with an ex are not going to be as dramatic as this one. We're going to show you how the tool is extracting information out, banking it, in the event database so that you don't have to
Right.
do that. So I just talk. All you got to do with Aimee is talk. Come as yourself. If you want to swear, you have a bunch of typos. Like this is not an issue. No one's seeing those things. It's just yours. You can even speak directly if you don't want to type. So I shared with Aimee, I was at this doctor's appointment. And the ex was on bad behavior. The doctor's appointment with the child called her a name. I was yelling at her. And then after the appointment, he tailgates her home with the kid in the car, is circling the house afterwards and
Mm,
calling her repeatedly. So obviously, this would be a very disturbing event. Aimee's going to respond with, and I have her set to long answers because most folks, if they change Aimee's personality, they like those long answers to have their experience reflected back to them in a way that feels like a complete and understandable and appropriately assigned experience. What's
right.
happened? So this feels good, right? People stay in this space. They can follow up, talk as long as you want. What's happening in the background is Aimee is actually extracting those data points. So she's going, okay, well, that was name calling. And he yelled at you with the doctor. Well, calling you 11 times is excessive contact. Tailgating you home with your child in the car is endangerment. And everything that fits with an observable, documentable event gets drafted automatically, right? So you don't have to go to that spreadsheet. You told Aimee it's getting drafted. So, for example, here she's created this draft for, after the doctor's appointment, ex followed home right on the bumper, making me afraid he would hit me with our child in the car. And then once home, he kept driving past and called the phone 11 times. It's automatically tagged, etc. All good. I can edit that event, make any changes, and I could also upload, like, here's a screenshot of the 11 calls. Here's a video of him
Mm,
circling the house. Now I don't have to do anything. It's done. What happens over time is the account populates. We get a picture of the dynamics, the behaviors that are present in this relationship. And I got to tell you, Chelsey, this page alone, people are like, I've never seen it all together in one space like this. And what we
I
hear from
know.
folks is it kept me from going back. There were times I thought I would go back and I looked at that and it kept me from going back. And that is huge. That, if there's not another word for empowerment, I don't know what that would be. Automatically timelined. automatically converted into trends. We can look at the trend line, et cetera. Everything's filterable, everything's exportable. Folks can make their own events. You can upload, you got a spreadsheet going already, just upload it right in, and Aimee will build your database right out of that. She'll go ahead and tag all of those things. This is kind of like if you took that lived experience and you blew it up into a constellation of stars, and there are all of the stars in the sky. That's everything up there. And I don't have to say it twice. Well,
Yeah,
sometimes
this
you need
is
to, oh,
Yeah, I
sorry,
was
go
just gonna
ahead.
say this is amazing, for the people who are just listening to it. Like we're getting to see the paragraph or the conversation you have with Aimee. It's you can actually then look at it. It gets put into these circles of different like types of abuse and types of strategies that they're using. So you can start to see a coercive control circle and like all
Yes.
labeled out all of the things that fit into explaining why you're being coercively controlled and how you're being
Mhm.
gaslighted and yeah, the timeline of events, which I think just helps survivors so much because that's one of the things, like you said, that makes us stay, that makes us go back, that makes us question again, is this me? Is this my fault? What
Mhm.
happened? Because trauma does fragment the mind. That
It
is what
does.
trauma is doing. And so, like Aimee says, is giving you that power back. It's really disempowering the abuser to use chaos against
Mhm.
you because now you're able to go back to it and see it in an organized fashion. So I just wanted to
I
highlight that.
love that. I love that. Disempowering, yeah, the perpetrator by, yeah, the confusion or chaos into clarity. I
Yes.
love that. That was really good. So if this is kind of all the stars in the sky, all of those pieces of information from that person's lived experience, then the binder would be like, okay, now make a constellation out of that.
Mm,
So, we document for a specific reason, right? And it's not just to see it, although that's really valuable. We document it because we might need it one day. And maybe we need it because we need a protection order. Maybe we need it because we're not making progress in therapy and we need to kind of put some gasoline on the fire, turn things up a notch and get information about our experience to our provider.
mm.
You're going to mediation. You're preparing for mediation. Your attorney needs you to do XYZ. Those are all times where you need to be able to bring together the right types of information so that you can move forward, whatever that looks like. We call it binders. So binders are the ability to say, okay, Aimee, let's get all of this together. It's literally a few clicks. So I clicked on binders, create one here. I give it a name. I tell Aimee what I want her to do. Couple of clicks forward. Takes about 90 seconds. So I made this one here for protection order. I said, Aimee, here's what I said. My attorney asked me to get everything together that might be useful for a protection order. Please put it together. I haven't changed this binder, so this is what she assembled for me. She's gone across all the documents I had uploaded, all the chats that we've had, all of the events, either that she created for me or that I created manually, and she's put them together. Starts on an overview page. Here's the findings. Here's what's contained in this space. Here's what's not contained. Like I didn't have any police reports or medical records in this account. The timeline of those events, the frequency and incidents, right? I can look at the abuse across here, including stalking behaviors, which would certainly be applicable in the context of a protection order. She's also created these tabs for me. Here's the history of this relationship as Aimee knows it and the kinds of things that were present. Also includes, for example, all of those cards, right? These are all of those
Mm.
event cards. She'll pull those in. If I have a picture with this, the picture will also be there or a document, etc. She's also created a tab for threats and escalation because that's really important in the context of a protection order. Here's some of the recent things that we're seeing. Here's some of the increase in severity that we're seeing, et cetera. I can export that. I can change it. I can take things off that I don't want. I can add things that I do want because I just remembered I never told Aimee about this thing and it should definitely go in this tab. And then send that off. We have customers who say, my attorney will only talk to me if I come in with an Aimee binder, which is horrible. And shame on the attorney. But it's that kind of like, I've got everything together. I have the things that you need. And I
Yeah,
did it in 90 seconds. I mean,
incredible.
yeah, that's yay for technology.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, how much could people save going back and forth in emails with their lawyer? I mean, I talk to clients almost weekly who say, my lawyer charged me hundreds and I just sent one email this week. I mean,
Yep.
Aimee, like, is this is an amazing deal for everything that she can do.
Or your attorney emails you and then you want to send back this emotional email because of course you
Yeah.
do. And so you go to Aimee and you say, this is what I want to say. And Aimee's like, well, how about this one? And now that email that you do send hopefully will cost you less money. Yeah, so it's
And this is what's
a thought
helping
partner.
survivors, yeah, get that leg up. Like, because that is what oftentimes keeps us stuck and then re-victimized in the system. Of course, it's the system's fault. Those need to change. But what are we going to do now to help people who are
Mhm.
in it? Because systems take time to change. But now you can use AimeeSays, and it can help mitigate or lessen some of the impact of those trauma symptoms while you're healing, of course. But you don't have to heal immediately and like put your fragmented memory back together and know how to deal with all your rumination and hypervigilance before you can proceed in court. You can start using this now and feel so much more confident and prepared, whether it's like you said, court, doctor office, therapist, and even just get clarity and healing in your own mind.
Yeah. Yeah. She just creates this kind of single pane of glass
Mm-hmm.
through which, you can see your experience and survivors never have that, right? Like just like you said, I can't even see it all in my head at the same time because there's all of that confusion. There's also like even if you know it really well, you still have to tell all of these other people and go through all of that all over again. So being able to create that one repository, that single pane of glass through which you process that experience is it's a game
Incredible.
changer.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Okay, well, I know we have just a few minutes left. So that was amazing. For anybody who is just listening and didn't see it, please check it out on YouTube because it really it's like being able to put all of the abuse on a timeline succinctly, see it as if you could see it, put it in picture form. I mean, that is just it's priceless. I can't even put into words how helpful that would be. So thank you so much for what you do and your time. I have one last question for you. This is the Restoring Resilience podcast. So I always like to end by asking if you had to give somebody one piece of advice that would help them start building resilience today, what would that be?
I take it back to am I the narcissist? Am I the problem? We burn a lot of emotional calories on that, right? The sooner you can check that one away,
Yeah.
the more of those emotional calories that you'll have available to expend on healing. If you are asking, is it me? Was it my fault? Did I cause this? The answer is most likely no. And I'm going to say, you
Mm,
know what? Because doubt, like I just said, most likely, that's not even enough. If you are asking yourself that question, the answer is no. You are not the person to blame. You are not the narcissist. And that loop is those burnt emotional calories that you cannot expend on something else and that will prevent like the moving forward in healing. So I think it's a huge act of resiliency to kick that one to the curb.
yeah. And Amy can help close that loop. If you're looping that in your mind, she can help you solve that. All right. Well, where can people find you? Where should they go to check into Amy Says?
AimeeSays.com, and it's spelled AIMEE. That's how you spell Aimee. AimeeSays.com. Any of the support or contact buttons come directly to me. Same thing with any of our socials. LinkedIn all comes directly to me. I'd be happy to talk to anyone who has questions or wants to learn more.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anne, for your time today. This was amazing. And we'll put all of that in the show notes so that everybody can check it out. Once again, I want to thank Anne for the incredible work she does and giving us an inside look at how Amy Says can really level the playing field and empower survivors. And as always, I want to remind you that no matter where you are in your healing journey, resilience can be restored. And we're going to keep building it together. I'll see you in the next episode.